Let's face it, weight loss can feel overwhelming. That's why Hers is changing the game. By providing access to GLP-1 medications plus expert care, they make your goals more achievable. Hers is transforming women's healthcare by providing access to affordable weight loss treatment plans delivered straight to your door if prescribed. Hers offers a holistic weight loss program with personalized solutions including compounded GLP-1 weekly injections featuring the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy or oral medication kits. So after submitting an online intake form, a licensed medical provider will determine what plan is best for you. And if prescribed, your program includes medication, ongoing care, and online support, and all at one cost. So if you've been struggling with your weight loss journey, it's time for you to find the best option that works for you through Hers. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/KateCasey. That's forhers.com/KateCasey for your personalized weight loss treatment options. forhers.com/KateCasey. Hers weight loss is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased. I love the look of luxury, but knowing that I got it at a great price. And I feel like you're like me too. And that's why I know you're going to love Quince. Quince is my go-to for luxury essentials at affordable prices. I get DMs all the time. Where did you get that sweater? I'm telling you, I got it at Quince. You know why? They offer high quality items at prices within reach. And the best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. So they do this by partnering directly with top factories. So Quince cuts the cost of the middleman and then passes the savings on to us. And the best part, it only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And who doesn't love that? In fact, the thing you need to get right now are the toasted almond silk pajamas. It's a beautiful gift for someone in your life or just for yourself. So give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/KateCasey for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/KateCasey to get your free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/KateCasey. Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey, and I've got a great documentary for you to watch this week. Now, many of you, like myself, love natural disaster documentaries. And you may remember in episode 577, I interviewed Rory Kennedy, the director of The Volcano Rescue from Fukari. That is also a great one to watch. It is on Netflix. And it chronicles the minute-by-minute account of unsuspecting tourists, which included a young couple from the U.S. on their honeymoon that were caught in a once-in-a-generation lethal eruption while sightseeing on an island off of New Zealand in 2019. Again, that was episode 577. Well, I've got another one for you, and also on Netflix. This one is about the Joplin, Missouri tornado. On May 22nd, 2011, 5,000 people attended the Joplin High School graduation held at Missouri Southern State University. The class of 2011 was the second largest in the school's past 15 years. The ceremony was attended by a capacity crowd. More than 400 graduates of Joplin High School threw their maroon-colored caps into the air. But shortly after the graduation ceremonies concluded at 5:41 p.m. local time, a devastating EF5 tornado struck the city of Joplin, Missouri, causing catastrophic damage to the city and the surrounding regions. From May 21st to May 26, 2011, one of the largest tornado outbreaks on record affected the Midwestern and southern regions of the U.S. There was a 6-day tornado outbreak sequence, with most of the tornadoes developing in a corridor from Lake Superior southwest to central Texas, while isolated tornadoes occurred in other areas. But the Joplin tornado began just west of Joplin at around 5:37 p.m. and quickly reaching a peak width of nearly 1 mile as it tracked through the southern part of the city before later impacting rural Jasper and Newtown counties, and then dissipated after 48 minutes on the ground at 6:28 p.m. The tornado devastated a large portion of the city and damaged nearly 8,000 buildings, including major facilities like one of Joplin's 2 hospitals, as well as much of its basic infrastructure. It amounted to a total of $2.8 billion at the time, which is about $4 billion today. making the Joplin tornado the costliest single tornado in U.S. history. This tornado killed 158 people, including 8 indirect deaths, and it injured more than 1,150 others, making it the deadliest tornado in Missouri, in addition to being one of the deadliest in the United States. In the aftermath, the Joplin Globe reported that 54% of the people killed died in the residences, 32% died in non-residential areas, and 14% died in their vehicle or outdoors. Joplin officials after the tornado announced plans to require hurricane ties or other fasteners between the houses and their foundations. Despite the destruction, 2 Waffle House locations in Joplin remained open following the tornado, and this led Federal Emergency Management Agency Administrator Craig Fugate to develop the concept of the Waffle House Index for measuring disaster impact. President Barack Obama toured the city on May 29, 2011, and spoke at a memorial service for the victims. And he would also deliver the commencement address at Joplin High School a year later in 2012 on the same date of the tragedy. At the time, he said, "No matter how we might try to avoid it, life surely can bring some heartache and life involves struggle. And at some point, life will bring loss. But here in Joplin, you've also learned that we have the power to grow from these experiences. We can define our lives not by what happens to us, but by how we respond." And then the president called the example set by the people of Joplin in the hard work that they put into the recovery, in the imagination they've shown in remaking their city, and inspiration. Twister, Caught in the Storm, is now streaming on Netflix. It is written and directed by Alexandra Lacey, who is my guest today. Set against a backdrop of end-of-the-world predictions on May 22nd, 2011, this coming-of-age feature-length documentary is told from the perspective of a group of young people in Joplin, Missouri, as they encounter the extreme power of Mother Nature when that rare EF5 mile-wide monster tornado hit their hometown on high school graduation day. In the fierce 200-mile-per-hour winds of this twister, they discovered the power of their resilience as they fought for survival, each with a transformative story spurred by their experiences of that day. This catastrophic event ravaged Joplin, and yet its community overcame, rebuilt, and became an enduring symbol of hope. The film features adrenaline-inducing real-life footage filmed by people in Joplin, taking us into the eye of the storm. Again, it is called Twister, Caught in the Storm. It is now streaming on Netflix, written and directed by Alexandra Lacey. And here is my interview. Alexandra, I'm so excited to talk to you about this documentary, but first, I have to ask you about the untold episode about Tim Tebow. Were you like a nutty football fan before that, or did you like get sucked into it? Because I think that story is so fascinating.
That's interesting. Wow, I wasn't expecting this. It's great to be on your show. Okay, so Tim Tebow, a little behind the scenes story there. So I was hired to come on and develop that idea at Raw. And I have to be honest, I was not a fan of American football. I say American because I live in London and we call it soccer here. But anyway, and I was digging into the research and speaking to all of the lots and lots of the players that aren't in the final series. And actually, one of my friends of friends used to work in the video department at the Gators. And I spoke to him and he said, "You know what? I've got a great story for you. I was a big part of how Tebow was discovered." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I got to hear this." So he told me a story about how he had been in the sort of coaching department at Tebow's high school prior to this, and that he had a VHS tape that he'd shot of Tebow playing. So when he then was working at the Gators, the same gentleman with Urban Meyer, he put a VHS tape on Urban Meyer's desk and he said, "You got to check out this guy." Wow. And because he was very junior on the coaching team, the tape was ignored for a couple of days because, of course, the more senior coaches were recruiting from other places or whatever. Anyway, eventually Urban Meyer sees the VHS tape and discovers Tebow. Of course, this story has not really been told that often, and that gentleman has sadly recently passed away. So I thought I would just let you know that little story. He gave me the lead on hundreds of practice tapes that form the spine for that series. So all those tapes were from the video department and had not been seen before that film.
Wow.
So that's more BTS detail for you.
And I do know how important that story is to the people of Florida. So I'm really happy that you highlighted it, and absolutely fantastic. And I love that series of untold stories. I mean, for sports dork like me, love it. This project is really interesting too. I want to first ask you about how this project came to you, because there are a lot of intricacies that I think are very interesting that would make the process of making this so fascinating. So how did it come to you?
So I was approached to tell the story of the Joplin tornado in 2011. And my initial reaction was, we've obviously seen films about this type of natural disaster done before with the firefighter and the cop talking and very sort of blue light focused. And I didn't want it to be a classic natural history documentary. So I said, if you'd like me to direct this, my approach is I'd like to find a unique way into the story, a cast of characters that could say something more about human nature and not just have it be focused on the disaster. Is there some kind of hope in adversity? Similar to Swamp Kings, really. I mean, that's there's human stories behind the sports, right? And even though I wasn't a football fan, what pulled me into that story was talking to all these incredible guys about what it was like to grow up in parts of America where their opportunities were very slim and the stakes were high. And I was so impressed by them as people, even though I wasn't a football fan, right? So with this story, even though it's a whole subject matter that was new to me, natural disaster, I just wanted to make sure we found the right characters and the right way in. And so that Netflix were up for that and we were up for that. And so we then started digging into the research to try to find who those characters were going to be. And in a city of 50,000, it's interesting. It feels like a small town, but it's 50,000 folks and a lot of surrounding communities that come into Joplin. There were so many stories. We got into town and we're talking to everybody, and every story is obviously important. But when we found out in the research that it was high school graduation that day, that felt significant because now this feels more universal. We can tell a coming of age story through the natural disaster from the teenage and young perspective, because anybody in this world, I mean, I'm not from Tornado Alley, I'm from California and England. If you never think you're going to experience a tornado, but perhaps you could think about if you had been a teenager going through something catastrophic like that, where you live in the world, how would that change you as a grown-up? Because we all go on a path of self-discovery. It took me till I was probably 35 till I really loved myself, knew myself, all of that, right? But what really struck me about these young characters is that they all worked out their magic and worked out their strength in one day.
Behind those cozy nights at home, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People producing more U.S. natural gas. People building grid-scale solar capacity. People turning landfill waste gas into pipeline-quality renewable natural gas. And people delivering all of that power where it's needed. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
This is a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup sound experiment. We're looking to find the perfect way to hear Reese's so you'll buy more of them. Here we go. Reese's, 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 Reese's. Hey, get out of here, you little stinker. Reese's,
Reese's, Reese's.
Peanut Butter Cups. That breathy one sounded very creepy, am I right?
Well, let's talk about the culture and the people that live in Joplin, Missouri. Take us to 2011 and who makes up this community? What is defining their lens through which they look at life?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if you've been to the Midwest, but they have this phrase, Midwest is best. And I've spent a lot of time there. Actually, I used to design in my previous career. I used to design the houses on Extreme Makeover Home Edition. So I had spent a lot of time in the Midwest and these smaller communities. And I think what always strikes me going to the Midwest is the fact that you know all your neighbors and you care about all your neighbors like their family. Mm-hmm. So community is the thing that really shines through in terms of like what's important to the people there. And being in the Bible Belt, also religion is a really strong part of people's experience. Not for everybody, but I mean, there's a lot of churches there. You'll see, as you saw, Cecil mentioned, I think he said there was more churches on every block than there are McDonald's. Right. So religion, is a big part of experience there. But I think community and religion are those are the two things that really struck me. And I guess the third thing to say that's relevant to this story is that, when I check the weather, I'm checking the weather to decide if I need to have an umbrella with me or a slightly thicker cardigan. Mm-hmm. People are checking the weather every single day because it can be life or death. Their meteorologists are someone they follow like local celebrities. It's so important to people that they know what's happening with the weather.
But that's also interesting too, because I think, and this is true of many different areas of the world with unpredictable weather or extreme weather, there seemed to be a layer of comfortability where they began to sort of blow off some weather reports. Like, it's not going to be that bad. And in this case, there were several people that thought it wasn't really that bad until, they're in a predicament where they don't know if they're actually going to make it through the next 15 minutes. So in terms of that moment in history for this community, which, as you mentioned, is in alignment with a high school graduation, how bad had the weather been before that? Would they have necessarily believed that a tornado of that magnitude would have hit their community?
So I would say that right now, their perspective is very different. Yeah. So let's zoom our minds back to then. There had just been a big supercell. I don't know the scientific terms for this, but there had been a sort of big supercell of activity of weather in the region in the days prior to this, not in Joplin, but in the days prior to this, where there was lots of ingredients that could spawn a tornado. But this is Tornado Alley during tornado season. They're used to seeing these cells showing up on weather patterns and things as they check the weather each day, right? Mm-hmm. What happened that day was extremely rare and very quick in what happened as well. So having spoken to some folks there, lots of folks there, the tornado sirens go off when they're testing them. And then they used to go off for large regions when it felt like there might be the sense that something could be up with the weather. And people got used to that, Mm-hmm. It's that kind of boy who cried wolf kind of thing. And that explains why in the film, people are saying, oh, it's okay. This happens a lot. We hear sirens. It's not that people didn't take it seriously, that there might be a tornado. They knew that, but perhaps the sirens meant that they weren't, it was sometimes they could blow it off and say, well, tornadoes happen here, but they happen out in the fields. They happen out in the plains on the border with Kansas. It's not going to come into town, And I think with this, what was rare is that you had two supercell storms that decided to combine and form what they have all described as a monster tornado. And then the fact that it changed course and came right through the center of town and was on the ground for like 30 minutes. Mm. So there was so many things here that were tricky. And another element to bring up that's really important for folks to know is that as Doug says, our grown-up weatherman in the film, that it was a rain-wrapped tornado. So it was blue sky, sunshine everywhere, apart from what looked like a big black wall coming into town. And it was 1 mile wide. So if you're on the ground and you're looking at, I've seen rainstorms coming from one direction before, you're not going to know that inside of that wall, there's a funnel. There's a tornado inside of that wall that's really dangerous, especially if you're a young person who's driving around town, hanging out with your friends, or, you're graduating or whatever it might be. So I think that's also something that was really hard for folks to know how to respond appropriately, is that they didn't know where it was or where the danger was inside of that mile-wide black wall.
So most of those people in that 1.5 mile stretch, they took shelter in their own homes. I think I saw a statistic, maybe like 54% of those that that died that evening were found in their residences. Would it have been possible to take shelter in your home and survive this? How many people actually were able to make it, and how were they able to make it? Because when you look at the mass destruction and you hear them retelling the story of what it was like, literally the person next to you being sucked out of whatever space that you were in, how many people were able to survive in the residences, and how were they able to actually survive?
That's actually a question I'm not sure I could answer because I wouldn't have the details on the stats with that. I think what I would say, though, is that it was surprising to me to learn that many of the homes don't have basements. And that's just because it's really expensive to put a basement in. Not everyone has the money to dig down and put a basement in. So at this moment in history, a lot of folks didn't have basements. And yeah, there were tornado shelters they could go to, but they were sparse. There weren't as many places to shelter outside of your home than you would expect back then. Now, because a lot of funding was put into place and there was an incredible rebuild that happened, as we now know, and they made a few more larger tornado shelter spaces for folks. But at the time, there wasn't as many. Back then they would say, try to get into a room inside of your home with no windows. So a lot of folks went into like an internal bathroom, got into their bath, et cetera.
When you look at the amount of destruction, and how most of those people were living a pretty humble life, there was an infusion of donations that came into that town. Of course, the government helped as well. How long was the rebuild?
It was the costliest recovery to a natural disaster that's been done in history, I believe. There was so much help that poured in. What I was struck by was learning that not only did the community just immediately grab chainsaws and start helping, they weren't waiting for help. They immediately got going. That's definitely the Joplin spirit for sure. Let's get it done together. But it was surrounding states pouring in and international folks coming in. There was one guy who came in from, I think, Tokyo, because America had helped in the recovery of the natural disaster that had taken place over there. And he wanted to come and pay it back and come back and help. So it's those kinds of stories that I can tell you about, because I was pretty struck by that.
As you write your life story, you're far from finished. Are you looking to close the book on your job? Maybe turn a page in your career? Be continued at the Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. Our professional master's degrees and certificates are designed to meet you where you are and take you where you want to go. At Georgetown SCS, the learning never stops, and neither do you. Write your next chapter. Be continued at scs.georgetown.edu/podcast.
Don't miss Good American Family.
We have a little girl here for adoption. She has dwarfism.
Starring Ellen Pompeo and Mark Duplass.
Something is off.
She's just a little girl. You think she's faking?
She has adult teeth. There are signs of puberty.
Inspired by the shocking stories that tore a family apart.
I don't know what's going on.
How old are you?
You should get a lawyer.
You have no idea how those people hurt this girl.
The Hulu original series, Good American Family. New episodes Wednesdays, streaming on Hulu.
What is the feeling that you get working on this project? I mean, again, to point out, there are so many young people that experience this unthinkable experience that they had, and the bravery to move through those life experiences again. And my hat's off to you and your team, because I never forget how difficult it is to have someone sit down and ask them to recount such a painful experience. And you clearly did it with such sensitivity. And I'm grateful that they were able to tell the story, because I think that the young people that participated were able to give me, as a viewer, a perspective that I don't know I would necessarily get from just a news report. To give the detail in which they gave. Again, like the idea of someone being next to you and you can feel them being sucked out of a space, unimaginable. But in talking to them, what is the feeling that you get now what is the sense of trauma that this community has experienced, and how have they been able to kind of move on from that in their own small way?
That's a really good question. I get to meet people from all walks of life in every story that I tell. And I get to know them for a period of time, and then I'm on to the next story. There's something about the characters in this film that I think I'll never forget. They really are the heart of this film, are the characters. And they each took part, not for the spotlight, nothing to do with Netflix. They took part because they felt like it was important that we were going to also explain to people about how they changed because of this experience, but also, the mental health implications, PTSD, understanding that there was hope in there somewhere, the understanding of loss, and feeling survivor's guilt, which is a term that I hadn't learned about until making this film. So that was really important to them, that was also going to be included in this film, and it wasn't just going to be focused in on the disaster element. So I just think with each of them, they just taught me so much about what really matters. If you think about this for a second, imagine if in a day you lose the high school that all of your memories are as a child, you lose your home with all the photographs of you as a child, all those memories are now gone, and you lose friends and teachers. That's a lot of loss, for one day. And the interviews for this are probably some of the most emotional interviews that I've ever done, actually. I want to make sure to approach every interview with sensitivity. We spend a lot of time building relationships with people way before there's a camera. I think that's really important, especially with these guys, because they were telling, in the beginning, they didn't really want to speak to my producer, Carla, and I, or they did, but they were a bit sort of nervous or not sure because they'd had news crews come in, as you can imagine, dozens of them, to report on the disaster in their town, some of which had, microphones in their face as teenagers asking them to cry and things like this, right? So we had to spend a lot of time getting them to understand that our approach was going to be sensitive, and we were going to take the time with them, and we were going to go at their speed. And if at any point they felt uncomfortable, they could let us know, and it was going to be a collaboration. And I think that's why those interviews are strong, because we built a relationship with them, and there was trust there. But on the actual day of each interview, I'm stepping through that experience with them step by step. And I do really appreciate them going back there to talk about the most traumatic thing they'd ever experienced as a young person. But I think it's important for people to understand the human impact when Mother Nature does something like this, right? So it felt important for them to be able to go there for that reason. And I know the whole film crew feels especially honored, particularly my producer, Carla, and I, that they trusted us with their stories.
I'm really glad at the end that you included the commencement speech that President Obama gave them, because I think he encapsulates the sort of the I don't even know what the word could be. He seemed to have such disbelief in how strong, not disbelief. President Obama, I think, expressed so beautifully how impressed the rest of the world was with their community, given what they had been through. And I can only imagine what your team must have felt in that space too. And I hope that what this film does is that gives that community that sense again, that the world is so impressed with what they were able to walk back from.
That's such a wonderful observation that you've made. And I hope that everyone who watches it feels that same way. Yeah, they're really a special community. You'd hope that every community would come together like that. And the message that Obama says is so important in the world, particularly right now, which is we are not on this earth to walk alone. We need to come together.
Yeah,
we need to come together. And so I think that his sentiments to the class of 2012 are something that we need to be listening to in 2025 So, really happy that we could include that. And the reason we did was because for Cecil, that was one of the most important moments for him. He got to graduate class of 2012 when he thought the world was going to end. They used to call themselves the class of the apocalypse, right? But the world had not ended. He'd graduated and Obama was at his graduation. So for Cecil, that was a big moment. So that's why we included that in the film.
My last question is a really silly question, but when you work on a film like this in a small community, do you find yourself having dinners in people's homes all the time?
That's a great question. Yeah, that does generally happen a lot. Like, hey, come on over, let's do a barbecue, kind of thing. Actually, in this town, there were so many great little restaurants, like mom and pop shops and little spots that they wanted to show us. Very proud of their town. So we did a lot of visiting the local coffee shops. And I wish I could think of the name of the coffee shop we went to so many times. And now I'm so sad that I'm forgetting the name. It was where a lot of the Joplin High School students would go for coffee. And I can't think of it. But anyway, I'm so sorry if you're listening. But yes, we did a lot of meeting up in local spots and enjoying what makes Joplin special. It felt important to understand that too when making the film, because I wanted to make sure the film had a really strong sense of place so that it felt unique to that town and not just like could have been anywhere, right?
Well, I can tell you as an outsider watching it, I hope that this community really feels embraced by the rest of the world because it's really an impressive story. Excuse me. So tell everybody where they can watch this and where they can find you.
Well, thank you, Kate. First of all, thank you, Kate. They can find me on my Instagram. My handle is Lacey_docs, LACEY_docs. And feel free to reach out. And if you have any stories that you think need to be told, I would love to hear them. And then you can check out The Twister Caught in the Storm on March 19th, 2025, only on Netflix. And I hope you guys will check it out. I think it's going to be, I can't wait for the world to see it and for the world to meet our characters.
And what are you working on next? Can you tell us or no?
I am developing another feature for Netflix. This was actually my feature debut, The Twister, and I'm now working on the next one.
Well, good. Well, keep me in the loop.
I will. I definitely will.
Thank you again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my great guest, Alexandra Lacey, and remind you to click subscribe. Make sure that you leave a 5-star review. Also, check out my What to Watch list of what to watch every week in unscripted TV by going to katecasey.substack.com. You can also get bonus episodes by going to Patreon, patreon.com/Kate Casey. And you've got plenty of extra content there. And also make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KateCaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, and Twitter Threads and Blue Sky at Kate Casey.
At Hotels.com, we know some travelers crave sand between their toes. Others want to be poolside with a drink on the way. And more often than not, those two people end up in a relationship. With the Hotels.com app, compare properties side by side across amenities like pool and ocean view. Compromise isn't so bad when you're holding a Mai Tai by a pool with an ocean view, agreeing that, yeah, this is better than finding sand in awkward places for 3 days. Book now in the Hotels.com app and find your perfect somewhere.